Okay, so what we're looking at here today is whether or not the GTX 900 series is still useful as far as, I mean, you can always play older games, but we're looking at whether or not it's still useful in a modern context, which we're going to be testing with Cyberpunk to determine. The only game that I would argue Cyberpunk does not, shall we say, represent is Jedi Survivor. Jedi Survivor will just destroy anything. But all the other games I'm aware of out there that I have tested with, Cyberpunk 2077, if it can play that, it can play them. Just Jedi Survivor. I didn't test with Jedi Survivor. The 980 Ti might run it, but not great, and I would recommend against it. But other than that, even newer stuff, what you see run here well, it'll run just about anything else well. So we've got what are, in my opinion, the three most relevant cards in this lineup. We've got the 980 Ti. This particular unit is a Gigabyte Windforce. I believe this was the higher end version that they sold. I could be wrong on that. I didn't do any research on it, but I believe this was their higher end 980 Ti. This is the ASUS Strix GTX 970. Again, I believe this is the high end 970. And then this is a fairly generic EVGA 2 gig GeForce GTX 950. So this one is, at least in the North American market, e-waste. Do not pay money for this card. The only time I would pay any money for this card, I mean, if you get it for $5, $10, okay, you want a card that works, whatever. It's probably more ideal for like HTPCs running your just movies on your TV, that kind of thing. But don't pay more than like $5 or $10 for this card. And the only way I would buy this is if I got it as part of a system. The next one is the 970. This particular 970 cost me, I believe I paid $30 for this unit about a year ago. I feel like I overpaid for it. I know eBay says one thing, but I normally deal with the local market. I wouldn't recommend paying more than $20 for this card. The 980 Ti is kind of an interesting card as far as value. eBay puts it at somewhere between like $60 and $100. No, but locally, which again is where I deal, no one's going to pay that for it because you can get a GTX 1080 for usually $60 to $80 if you really dig. I've seen them as cheap as $50. Did I say 10? I hope I didn't say 1080 Ti. 1080. 1080 non-TIs can typically be had for $60 to $80 if I dig. I've even gotten them off eBay for $80. So those ones that you see for $100, $125, yeah, no, don't buy a 1080 for $125. So this might be worth $60 to $80, but and I paid $60 for this particular unit. The only reason I paid that much for it was because I wanted it on a moment's notice, and I didn't want to wait for it. I didn't want to watch for a deal. And also, this is a nice 980 Ti. If it had been like the generic low-end like EVGA version, or maybe like the reference edition, I wouldn't have paid that much. But for this card, I was willing to pay a few dollars more to get a nicer example. And I've never actually had a Windforce 980 Ti. I've had a bunch of the 980s and a bunch of the 970s. Tons of the 970s. I buy tons. They're a good looking card. But I've never had this. And which actually I kind of like. It's got this, normally this is all black. It's got this kind of whitish, silverish color scheme to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to be running Cyberpunk 2077 at medium settings with quality level FSR. And I believe that's your best bet for your best performance, whilst also not losing any of your visual details. At least not enough for it to matter. It's a pretty big leap, performance wise, going from there to maxed out. Not even including ray tracing. But I think medium settings, 1080p plus a little bit of FSR is kind of the real good middle ground. So I'm going to show you some charts, and we'll take a look, and I hope you guys find this interesting. Okay, so before we get to the numbers on the 900 series video cards, I wanted to give you guys a little rundown on how exactly I tested. So first we're going to look at settings. So all of the systems, all of the video cards, I ran under the same settings. So we did 1080p resolution, and then it says custom here, but we are at medium setting level, and we are using AMD FX Super Resolution. It shows auto, but we did do quality on all of them. Crowd density was medium on all of them. Field of view was turned all the way up. Motion blur was off, and everything else was the standard medium setting preset. So, and then additionally to that, so I tested it in the most, shall we say, rigorous way I could. I didn't go out to any of the further out areas. I did all of the testing in the downtown area of Cyberpunk. And the reason I did this was because I wanted to be able to show what the worst case expectation was, and then I also wanted to be able to show what the, well, no, I'm sorry. I only wanted to show the worst case, because then anything that you get is going to be better. So one of the things I did was I only tested while driving around on the bike at a fairly high speed. Typically what that does is it puts it under more strain because it's drawing a ton of stuff fast. At least I assume that's the reason why. But it generally takes... Oh, I didn't want to do that. Oh, but look. I wish I could survive that in real life. Driving around in the city on a bike, it's putting it under more draw strain. It's just drawing more stuff. There's more things going on than if you're on foot and it's just showing the one little area where you're you know, walking around on foot. Here I'll give an example. See if it does it. So we get off the bike, and it doesn't shoot up, but it does go up, and it would give a higher average frame rate in most cases. So then in situations like this, it goes down a little, and being on the bike in traffic with people around and pedestrians and stuff was what gave me the ability to kind of keep the stress level on it as high as I could for the longest period of time I could. Yeah, see, now you're hitting a little bit higher frame rate. Surprisingly enough, that doesn't actually... Okay, no, there we go. Now we drop the frame rate a little. But again, being on the bike allowed me to keep it at the highest stress level for as long as I could. And then also being in the downtown area rather than, again, being in kind of the outland areas, because there's just not as much stuff in the outland areas. It's just kind of bare open space. So it's not as hard for the computer to render under those circumstances. So you can be pretty confident that your normal use for Cyberpunk will always show as good of results as I have here, but in many cases it will show quite a bit better of results than I got here. It shouldn't be a case where this is unrealistic testing. That definitely shouldn't be a problem. So then the reason why I tested on... I wanted to test also on 2 real-world test scenarios. So I didn't want to put this on, say, my 13900K, and I also didn't want to put it on, say, a first-gen i7. Realistically, this is going to be being used. These cards are going to be getting used on like a 4th or 6th gen type systems. I can't account for every use case, but I think 4th and 6th gen are probably more accurate use cases as to how real users are actually going to use these cards. So that's what I tested on, and then I have it on the 9th gen system just to give you an idea of if you push these cards to their limit, how fast can you go? And you'll actually notice it's not much faster. Yes, it's true. I mean, I could try to do 4K, I could try to do 2K, and we just get into the weeds with just infinite amounts of data. I wanted to give kind of a quick reference. Okay, this is what I can actually expect from a 900 series card, and then you can kind of build on that. But let's get to the performance numbers and show you what I came up with. So the first thing we're taking a look at here is the frame rate performance numbers for the GTX 900 series cards paired with the Core i7 4790. So if you take a look, obviously the 980 Ti is absolutely playable. And it stays playable throughout all the metrics. In fact, even the 1% lows didn't even go below 30 FPS. And my finding with Cyberpunk 2077 is that if you're able to hold a solid 30 FPS or higher, you're pretty solid. You're going to have an enjoyable, playable experience. Once it starts dipping below that 30 FPS, though, that's when you start having trouble, and it makes the game really not very much fun. You start getting those random stutters and stuff. So we're looking at the 970, and I didn't realize my graph was as unspecific on the frame rates as it is. But looking at the 970, minimum frame rate did stay generally above 30. So it was a mostly playable experience. But you did get these drop downs. I mean, your average was only 40. So this is basically the lowest you want to be at. This is basically a visual, should I say, a data representation of the lowest place you want to be at for Cyberpunk 2077 to be playable. This is playable. You got a bit of jumps here and there, but average frame rate, you're sitting at over 30. Your low frame rate, your regular low frame rate is over 30. And your 1% lows are, where did we hit for that? Oh, we're almost right on 30. We're literally right on 30 for the 1% lows. So you're probably going to experience generally smooth gameplay here on the 970. And keep in mind, as I specified in the previous video, I did run it to where we were in the parts of the game that push the card the hardest. And so you're probably not going to have issues with it suddenly going lower than this, because I was in the areas where it would be the lowest. So it should be at least this good or better. And then the last one is the 950. It just wasn't playable. I don't have a lot to say about this. You're looking at average frame rate of, where were we? 25. And that doesn't seem like much going from 25 to 30, but I'm telling you, it makes a huge quality of life difference. Your low frame rate was, what's 21? Or no, we were 11. No, I'm sorry. We were at 20.5 was our normal low. And then 1% lows were 18.9. And then this right, where is it? This right here is where you're going to get your real garbage experience. Every so often this happens, and it's just going to stutter, and it's going to look like garbage. So yeah, the 950 is basically a non-playable experience, but everything else is okay. So let's get on to the next one here in just a second. Okay, so the second one I did Actually kind of surprised me. I thought that these cards were as old as they are. I see a lot of fairly old cards that have fairly high bottleneck numbers as far as how new of a system you can put them with and keep getting additional performance. I thought it was going to be much higher than this, but it turned out I was wrong. So when you look at these numbers, they are within margin of error of the same numbers on the i7-4790. You got a little bit higher on the average frame rate on the 980 Ti. The actual thing that I noticed was, generally speaking, they were actually slightly lower, which suggests to me, because this 9820X is a 10 core at 3.3 gigahertz, but it's several years newer technology. So it's what do they call it? Skylake X, or I don't know, something like that. It's an X299 based platform, whereas the 4790 is Haswell. Or Haswell, Devil's Canyon. It might have been Devil's Canyon. I can't remember. But you're talking about 2013 to something like 2018. So you have a pretty big difference there. So it appears that what's happening here is we're losing a little bit of performance because it's not responding to the extra cores and it's not gaining anything on the architecture. So in fact, what it's suggesting to me is that most likely these cards have almost hit their limit. I might try them with like a 12th gen and you might see a little bit of a gain, but they've mostly hit their limit looking at this. So we were in pretty much the same place as before. The 980 Ti was playable across the board on all metrics. The 970 was just barely playable. Yeah, look at this. You're hitting dead on 30 for your 1% lows. And actually, I said 0.1 on the last one. I didn't put 0.1, and the reason I didn't put 0.1, this is a good example right here. It was really hard to actually test in the game in such a way as to not really blow this out. So anytime like you had to keep moving and be in a visually stimulating situation. So if you ever, say for example, accidentally walked too close to a wall, that would blow this out. Same with, that would blow this out. This would blow out if, for example, I was testing on a hard drive, on a modern 14 terabyte hard drive, and these numbers really represent the load, the tiny sections of load, and I almost never encountered it. It wasn't really a big deal, but anyway, so what we're seeing here is that the 970 and 980 Ti are generally usable, which means that the 980 is also going to be usable. However, the 950, and I'm going to guess also the 960, based on the 970 barely being usable, the 950 and the 960 are both e-waste at this point. The only thing you're going to use these for is older games that are basically this generation, and maybe some esports titles. But these the 950 and the one that slots in between the 960 are no longer AAA capable games. So I hope that kind of is quick and dirty. It was longer than I wanted it to be, but I didn't spend 30 minutes going in deep, so I hope this is helpful. Anyway, thanks for watching the video.